Hoops, and he is a 2011 graduate from CFC, a business administration major, but he took one PR class, and it has been super helpful for what he does now, which is mostly digital marketing, digital social media. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
But has spent several years doing traditional PR, and more importantly, for what we're going to talk about, he started a blog while he was at CFC related to the Cougars men's basketball team. He's kept that going. He ended up adding a podcast last year and rebranded the whole thing with a super snazzy website. And he is going to talk with us about basically that, his blog, his podcast, how to do it, how to make it work, and how much fun it is. And just a quick preview, Tommy, I'm going to put you on the spot at the end to give us some of your best picks for March Madness, because I got to fill out my bracket this week, and I figure you've been paying more attention than I have, so you can help me out.
Yeah, don't hold me to any of those picks, but I'd be happy to try to help.
I just want the big ones, the Final Four. Help me with the Final Four. All right, so you've been talking with me a little bit about your background, but if you will share with my students who are mostly comm majors, but with lots of different interests, from more traditional journalism to kind of regular public relations and marketing, but even to just not quite sure, but wanting to do something probably in business and recognize the need to be able to be a good writer, a good communicator, good on social media, etc. So if you'll share just briefly what you did at CFC and the PR class and how that kind of got you to what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So like you said, business administration major at the college. I took one intro to PR class, and it ended up being my career for the last 8 years or so. So it definitely was well valued. Started as a marketing concentration. I did an internship with Rawl Murdy, which is an ad agency down in Charleston that curtailed into PR agency work. So I did that out of school for about 4 years, doing traditional PR, writing press releases, pitching media on products or storylines or destinations. I was mostly involved in hotels, resorts, golf courses, that sort of thing. So setting up media to come visit and write about these destinations. And then that traditional PR role turned into what I do now, which is online reputation management, which is basically taking the basics of public relations and making sure a company or an individual's best foot is forward when it comes to where they show up in Google, what their online presence is like, and making sure that is optimized to be as positive as possible. But my hobby or my side gig along the way has been
your obsession.
Yeah, my healthy obsession has been this blog and this podcast, just following the men's basketball team. Started in that PR class. We had an assignment to write a blog of our choice. This was when blogs on anything were starting to pop up. And I chose the men's basketball team, and I continued writing about them, after graduation. It was just a good way to kind of stay in touch with the school and with, something that I really loved. And the past couple of years, as the team's gotten better, I've kind of stepped it up, and that culminated with the podcast this year, which has been a really fun kind of project to start.
So when you started blogging, the team wasn't very good, were they?
It was my senior year, so it was kind of the tail end of the Bobby Cremins era, and they were good for that first part, and I had a lot to write about. And then quickly things, didn't go so well in the next regime. So I kind of took some time off and was writing less frequently. And then when
that's pretty good to keep writing when you're not even at the school and they're not doing very well, and you're going to keep up a blog just for the fun of it. It
was less fun when the team was winning 9 games and there wasn't much to write home about. But
yeah, I started blogging about the Broncos the year after they lost to the Seahawks, but they still had Peyton Manning. They were still good. They went to the playoffs. Then eventually they went to the Super Bowl. So that was awesome. It was like the pinnacle of sports blogging. And then these past 3 years have been just crap.
Well, sometimes it is easier to write about a bad team, because when things are good, you don't have as much to write about. You're just like, oh, things were great. They did what we expected them to do, and it's all good. And then you can kind of nitpick when things are going poorly and speculate.
True. That's true. Although, and how have you found, like, with response from fans? Because I think, one losing season or a bad season, fans, they also like to critique and criticize, and so it gives them a lot to talk about. But you have a lot of bad ones in a row, and it's demoralizing. So,
yeah.
I, as a Broncos fan, we've been pretty lucky, but for 3 years in a row and then to have 2 losing seasons, I've definitely noticed that fans don't like to come to the blog as often. They get tired of complaining about the same thing. Whereas when they're good, they don't really get tired of being happy about, Peyton Manning being great, or, I would imagine with CFC, I mean, it's pretty awesome to keep talking about how great Jarrell Brantley is, or about those dunks, or about, it's good. Wins are good. So.
Yeah, the podcast download and blog site traffic numbers would reflect that, because it seems like after they lost in the semifinals this year, people kind of checked out. Whereas like preseason and non-conference, everybody wanted to chime in, right?
So what did you think about? So you cover the home games, or at least you watch them, and then you live tweet during the games, and you do a podcast after, and you write a blog. Anything else?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I have 2 other guys, other CFC grads who are really helpful and have helped me when I can't be there, or, when I miss a game for something. So yeah, I have some help, but that's usually the typical breakdown, is tweeting during the games, and then a blog post right after, and then a podcast every week. And
will you continue the blogcast every week through the off season, or do you wait, do you pick it up? Because this will be your first off season?
This will be the first off season, and I am planning a wedding. So my fiance hasn't. Yeah, my fiance has barely seen me during basketball season, so I might need to do some work on the wedding and things like that. So maybe it'll be less frequent during the summer, but we'll pick it up after the wedding.
When's the wedding? Is it spring or summer?
September.
Oh, fall. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Yeah. As a married blogger, I can recommend taking some time off in the off season.
Yeah, I need to do that.
For her sake and yours, actually.
Yeah.
So tell my students, how has writing, and what have you done maybe to improve your writing or concentrate on writing, since writing wouldn't have been probably a major focus when you were at CFC, although obviously you had a class and you had to do blogging, but you've probably done far more writing in the last 8 years than maybe you anticipated when you were in school. So anyway, I don't know if my question was very clear in there, but how much writing are you doing, and what would you recommend to students for kind of how to think about and prepare and be ready for how much writing they're going to need to do in any number of ways in this field?
Yeah. So I know it probably sounds cliche, but reading is probably the most important thing to do when you need.
Cliche. That's awesome. Everybody, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Read good writing.
Yeah. So, I mean, early in my career, I still write every day, and, I've had to write really advertising centric writing. I've had to do hundreds of press releases. I've done lots of client facing writing where you're speaking directly to, somebody who's working with the agency. So you have to have different voices for each of those things. And obviously the blog is a totally more, less formal voice. So, do whatever writing you can early on, be, willing to do that. And then eventually I think you kind of hone where your strengths are. And then that kind of influences your voice, whether it's on a conference call or in a podcast or whatever. Right. You kind of get a feel for how you sound and kind of what your cadence and your rhythm is like. So read a lot, try to do writing in as many different voices as you can. And then that kind of go from there.
What would you say has been the most rewarding part about the blog and the podcast? Both separately or together even?
I think just finding the breadth and depth of the CFC fan community. You definitely see it, compared to the rest of the conference in attendance numbers and just overall fan support. But, the podcast was really spurred by seeing North Charleston Coliseum last year with 8,000 Cougar fans. And I was like, okay, there's maybe like an audience for more of this.
Were you at that game?
I wasn't. I was watching, I was streaming it on my laptop, and my fiance actually has a video of me like crying when the game ended.
Yeah, that game, I took my son to that game, who was 11 at the time, and it wasn't late at night, but it ended up being a late night for a fifth grader. But I asked him if he wanted to go. It was the championship. We'd gone to the other two, so he was so excited. And I could not have asked for a better game to take a child to and have a more exciting ending. I mean, tying it up after being down to go into overtime and then winning in overtime. And that, like you said, that Coliseum was unbelievable. I don't even think I've been to some great football games for the Broncos, but truthfully, just the atmosphere, and because you're so close to the team and it's so fast, and it's like, I don't think I've been to a better event for excitement and fun than that game. I will never forget that game. It was crazy good.
I think you saw the 20 years of NCAA tournament drought kind of like lifted off everybody's shoulders at the end of that game. And obviously, playing it in North Charleston definitely helped with that. But.
And like, you just can't, I mean, if you were a player on that team or the coach, Earl Grant, you cannot ask for a better way to win. I've always thought that the come from behind, win at the end is the most exciting way to win any game. And so it's just like a Cinderella story almost for that game, for that year, that season. It was unbelievable. So when was your first podcast?
First podcast, Earl Grant was friendly enough to sit down with me back in September or October, and we just talked about the upcoming season, and he let me kind of pick his brain a little bit, which I appreciated. And that was the first one. And I learned on the fly how to edit it and how to post it and promote it and all that good stuff. And
sorry. So how do you tell me, actually, I'd love to know, as well as my students, just the basics of the process for doing your podcast and the things, the software you use to do it.
Yeah. So I use a system called Audacity to edit it. I usually am doing my interviews remotely because I'm up here in Washington, D.C. So I use a system called Zencastr, and these are both free tools that make it really easy. So that's like a Google Hangouts or a Skype that you can record on.
Right.
And then I go in and edit out as many of the ums and awkward sounds. And
I do too.
Sounds of like an ambulance going by or whatever. And then I'm left with a finished product, which is uploaded to an RSS feed, which is just kind of like a running feed of all the episodes. And then that gets pulled into iTunes and Google and all the other places where you can find a podcast.
Do you have to do something to pull it into iTunes and like get it so that it's available on iTunes and Google Play? And
you have to submit it. You have to submit your first episode, I think, and then once you're approved and you meet all of their stipulations, they run it from there.
Gotcha. And do you always have a guest? I've listened to several, and you've often had a guest, either remotely or.
Yeah. So for my podcast setup is a rotating guest spot. So it's me and a guest every week, and it could be a coach, a former player, somebody in the media. So we've had Andrew Miller from the Post and Courier. We've had Everett German, who does the play-by-play, Coach Grant, a couple former players. So just come on, talk about the game, preview the week ahead, talk about whatever other stuff's going on with the team.
Do you try to keep your podcast to a certain length, or do you just however it works out that week?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the nature of the podcast. I know there's some like true crime podcasts that will go 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think the sweet spot is like 35 to 45 minutes for us, just to recap 2 games and kind of talk about whatever other stuff is going on.
Yeah. And for blogging then, you kept doing that. How did that evolve? Do you feel like your writing has changed? You mentioned, which I thought was great, how you kind of develop your voice. Do you ever look back at your first one? Like, has your voice changed, or have you just sort of refined how you write?
Yeah, if I go back and read my stuff from 2012, I want to put like a bag over my head, but I keep it on. I keep it on the blog. Yeah, I think it's cleaned up a little bit. I would definitely say it's more focused. When I think maybe it was just sort of the nature of those early blogging days, but it would just be like a wall of text, and now it's kind of broken up into more readable chunks, which I think is just more easily digestible. So that's probably the biggest change.
When you read a lot of stuff, how much do you read blogs versus, sports news versus whatever, other news, anything?
Yeah, I still read a lot of blogs, whether they're sports blogs or digital marketing blogs or, news or whatever. And then I try to read like a book every other month or so, like usually nonfiction. So try to, again, just read different things and get a feel for different ways to write. And I think that kind of makes its way into my writing every once in a while.
Yeah, and how have you seen in your work, in both in your sort of your personal passion here versus, or in addition to the things you're doing with your clients and everything else, just the whole world of blogging and more recently podcasting explode? Like, since you are in the middle of all of that and you're probably paying a lot of attention to the analytics, tell us a little bit about sort of where you see both of these going. Is podcasting going to continue being as popular? Will it drop off? Is it a fad, or is there a lot of potential there?
Yeah, so I think what's happening in podcasting right now is really similar to what was happening to blogging in the early aughts, the early 2010s, where you see a lot of people, and then I think eventually it'll whittle down to the people who kind of keep it up and are saying something unique.
Well.
Yeah, hopefully doing it well. So yeah, I mean, from a digital marketing perspective, obviously the advent of like search engine optimization has been huge. Making sure you're writing things for Google to crawl it and post it where people are searching that topic. So the way you title things, the way you format things is definitely, I think you see that in, kind of the clickbaity titles of things with, a question mark at the end. Podcasting, I think, is going to follow a similar arc where podcasts will show up in search, and that's how people will kind of find them eventually. So yeah, I do think podcasting will, kind of whittle itself down a little bit, but it's definitely a really interesting medium right now, and people are doing a lot of really cool stuff there. So
what do you like the most about podcasting versus blogging in particular?
Yeah, I think it just gives you the chance to explore a topic a little bit deeper, especially if you're talking with somebody else about it. You can press a little bit more and explore a topic a little bit more in depth. And I think as a listener, just to be able to have it on when you're shopping for groceries or you're at the gym or whatever, just getting that feed of information that way is just a lot easier than having to go out and find it and read it. So.
I know when the way I came into blogging was sort of a backwards way. And so I'd been teaching, you should start a blog. Blogging is good. But I didn't really work in it and didn't have a whole lot of knowledge about kind of the world of blogging. And when I got into it, and especially sports, which is, any kind of niche topic is very popular in blogs, I was honestly flabbergasted with how many people spend time commenting on blogs. And all day long, I would see on our blog, it seemed like people did nothing else except read a blog and comment. And that could partly be unique to sports because people love to talk about sports. Mm-hmm. But I have noticed the same with podcasts. If it's a topic you like, and if it's a sports team, I think that has a lot of personal draw. People will just absorb everything they can find about that team or, about that mm-hmm. sport. And so podcasting, like you said, it's not like they will sit down necessarily to just listen to the podcast, but they love to have it on at the gym rather than watching the news or even listening to music because it's more in depth. And it's also got that same, or often has a little bit of that same irreverence that you get from a blog. where it's not like the sports talk shows or the sports news shows where you feel like they have to say certain things. You get a podcaster who says whatever he wants or whatever she wants. And
yeah, I think definitely if you're passionate on the subject, it will come across in the podcast. But I think you need to think about how people are digesting your information more, and it is kind of easy to tune it out. So I think an issue that a lot of new podcasters seem to get into is not being focused enough and just hitting record and being like, I can talk about this, and me and my co-host here can just talk about this, and not having structure to it,
right,
or a consistently engaging topic that keeps people tuned in rather than just kind of tuning out.
Right. That's a really good point, because just like writing, if you just stream of consciousness, put your thoughts down, nobody wants to follow that. And the same thing with a podcast. If it's just all over the place, it's boring after a few minutes. So it's hard to follow. So last question before I put you on the spot with March Madness. What advice in general would you tell CFC students right now? Like whether it's career or writing or just like as a college student before you get out into the real world, or how to kind of look at getting into the real world. You've now been working in it for 8 or 9 years. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say definitely early in your career, try to be adaptable, try to do different stuff, even if it's not exactly what you want to do right out of college. Take a stab at it, see what you like and don't like, and kind of guide your career from there. Definitely utilize the alumni chapters. I know up here in DC, I think we have the second biggest after Charleston. So that's a great way to meet people in your field, to network, to get advice from people who have maybe been out of school a little bit longer. And yeah, just if there is something you are passionate about in the communications world, whether it's a podcast or a blog, do it on the side. And then maybe you can use it in your resume or as a writing sample or something like that. Just do that and get as much experience as you can, and take the next step from there, I would say.
Awesome. And so students on Twitter can follow you at Holy City Hoops? Yeah,
Holy City Hoops on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, if anybody still uses that, or holycityhoops.com.
I don't think students do. Their parents probably.
Right. Feel free to reach out to me if you need career advice, or, I'm happy to help any other CFC students.
Awesome. So last thing then, March Madness. What do you have?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased. I grew up as an anti-Duke kind of fan. So I know they're everybody's favorite. I think I have them losing in the Final Four to Gonzaga or something. So I think my eventual champion, either UVA or UNC, depending on the bracket. I think this is kind of a year where it might be a little chalk. I think there's a couple teams that are head and shoulders above the others. So you usually get some upsets in the first round, and then kind of it goes chalk after that. The favorites kind of win out. So I think 1 or 2 seeds in the Final Four is probably going to happen.
All right, 2 teams I want to know about. Where do you have the UT Volunteers exiting, and where do you have the Iowa State Cyclones exiting?
Ooh, I might have Iowa State going out a little early. UT,
no!
Tennessee, I have going pretty far. I think I have Tennessee in the Elite Eight or something like that. They're good.
Yeah. UT was looking good, and then they lost by 20 to Auburn. I thought
they were on pace for a 1 seed, and that was a bad loss.
I mean, is Auburn that good? I didn't really.
I mean, College of Charleston should have beaten Auburn in the tournament last year. I'm not gonna go back on that, but there's some drama there.
I don't know. The foul on Riller's 3-pointer would have been 3 shots, right?
Should have been going to the line. Yeah, but I digress.
We won't talk about that.
Yeah.
All right. Tommy, it has been awesome to talk to you. Thanks so much. Please let me know the next time you're in Charleston. I'll have you come talk to my class. I'll take you out for a beer, and we can talk hoops then.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.